I never believed in demons. Not really. Not beyond the stained glass warnings and whispered sermons the nuns fed us as kids. But belief isn't necessary when the thing in question believes in you. It began with a book. Of course it did. My entire life has been books, dusty ones, torn ones, leather-bound and whisper-thin pages that crumble if you breathe too hard. I work in the manuscript restoration room of the Biblioteca Ambrosiana in Milan, buried in a back corner of the old archives. No foot traffic. No noise. Just me, my tools, and the smell of paper older than most nations. That day, I was working on a forgotten codex catalogued as theological fragment, circa 1390. No title, no author. Just a crumbling leather cover and brittle pages bound with hand-stitched thread. It smelled strange. Not old. Not moldy. More metallic. Like rust and rainwater. I was deep into repairing a cracked page, gently lifting a fragile corner, when I noticed something odd about the binding. It was thicker than usual, stuffed with something. I tilted it toward the window light. There was something hidden inside the spine. Curious, I fetched my scalpel and carefully peeled the stitching loose. The moment the thread snapped, I felt a shiver crawl up my arms, like the room had suddenly grown colder, but only around me. I told myself it was just nerves. Stupid. Inside the binding was a small roll of vellum, far older than the book itself. Someone had hidden this deliberately. It was sealed with black wax, and a mark I didn't recognize. A spiral wrapped in thorny lines that ended in a sharp point, like a needle driven through the eye of a storm. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. The wax broke with a soft pop, and I unrolled the parchment slowly. It was written in a spidery Latin, mostly chants I'd seen before, nonsense about spiritual guardians and warding light, but one line stood out. Not just because it was written in deep crimson ink that hadn't faded, but because the letters hummed. Not audibly. No. But my skin knew the sound. My heart felt it. The line read, Et nomen ius est felipil. I read it aloud because of course I did. I've translated dozens of ancient scripts over the years, and sometimes you need to hear the words to feel the rhythm. But the moment the name left my lips, the air in the room shifted. The window rattled. The overhead lights flickered. And every single book in the room, the thousands of them shelved in perfect silence, shuddered as if something unseen had passed through them. I stood frozen, the scroll still trembling in my hands. My breath caught in my throat, and for the first time in my life, I felt afraid of ink on paper. I whispered the name again, slower this time. Felipil. That was when the shadow on the far wall moved. Not the kind that shifts when clouds pass the sun. No. This one detached itself, pulled away from the wall like a smear of oil come alive. Just for a second, long enough for me to see the shape of it, a tall figure with arms too long and a head tilted as if it were listening. Then it was gone. The light snapped back to normal. The window stilled. The silence returned. But something had changed. The scroll burned cold in my hands, like ice drawn from a black sea. I stuffed it into a folder and locked it in my drawer, telling myself it was a coincidence. A draft. Bad lighting. Lack of sleep. But when I left the room that evening, I passed by one of the tall mirror panels on the archive door. And in the reflection behind me, just for a blink, I saw someone standing over my shoulder. He was smiling, and I swear to God he mouthed the word, "Thank you." The morning after I found the scroll, I woke up with a tightness in my chest, like I hadn't been breathing right all night. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Usually I could hear the traffic outside my window, or the clatter of my upstairs neighbor making espresso. But today, it was as if the city had taken a breath and forgotten to let it out. I stood in front of the mirror brushing my teeth when I noticed something strange. My reflection blinked half a second later than I did. I froze. I stared at myself, eyes wide and foam dripping from the corner of my mouth. Maybe I was still groggy. Maybe I imagined it. I splashed cold water on my face and leaned closer. Just me. Just tired eyes. Hollow cheeks. Nothing else. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, like the air around me had thickened. I left my apartment, locking the door behind me twice. Habit, mostly. The elevator was out again, so I walked down the old stone stairwell, each step echoing behind me, as though someone followed from one floor above. Outside, the morning sun should have warmed my face, but instead it felt dim. I looked across the street. There was a man standing there. A tall figure in a charcoal coat, face half hidden by a wide-brimmed hat. He was still. Too still. I squinted, trying to see his face. But the moment a car passed between us, he was gone. Not walked away. Gone. Like a dropped thought. I didn't want to admit I was unsettled, but I found myself walking faster toward the Biblioteca Ambrosiana. The moment I stepped inside, the familiar scent of old paper and lemon-scented polish grounded me a little. Almost. I brought the scroll with me, tucked into a cloth pouch in my satchel. I hadn't dared look at it again since last night, but I could feel its weight. Not heavy, not really, but present. Aware. That was nonsense. Paper can't be aware. I told myself that over and over. Around noon, I visited the restricted section, where the oldest, most fragile texts are kept. I'd worked here for almost 9 years. I knew every inch of this room. But today, the shadows between the shelves looked deeper. I wasn't alone. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. I wasn't being watched, not exactly. More like recognized. As if the air itself knew who I was now. As if something in the walls whispered, "There he is." That's when I decided to visit someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Father Lucien. He used to be a priest. He left the church after claiming he'd seen something during an exorcism that made him question everything. He lived alone now in a cramped apartment above a dusty bookstore on Via Tasso. We weren't close, but he was the only person I knew who might understand what I'd found. He opened the door slowly, blinking at me with suspicion through thick glasses. "Inzaghi," he said, his voice rough like sandpaper. "Didn't expect to see you." "I need your help," I said, and held up the pouch. "I found something, and I think I made a mistake." He motioned me inside without a word. His living room smelled like incense and damp wool. Books were stacked everywhere, on tables, chairs, even the floor. Most of them were in Latin. Some weren't, in any language I recognized. I pulled out the scroll and unrolled it on the table. He didn't touch it. His eyes narrowed at the ink. Then he leaned back, crossing himself slowly. "Where did you find that name?" he asked. "I didn't know what it was," I said. "It was inside a manuscript, sealed behind the binding." "You said it out loud?" I nodded. Lucien stood and walked to the window. He didn't look out, just stood there, fingers tapping the glass. "Inzaghi," he said finally, "you've spoken something that remembers being heard." I didn't speak. I couldn't. The name, it's not just a word. It's a binding. A wound. You've opened it, and now it knows you. I wanted to laugh, to tell him this was all ridiculous. But the image of my reflection blinking wrong, the man across the street, the silence in my apartment, none of it felt like coincidence anymore. "What do I do?" I asked. He turned, face pale. "Pray it doesn't start talking back." I woke to silence. Not the comforting kind that blankets you in early morning peace. No, this was a silence too complete. Like the world had forgotten how to breathe. I sat up slowly. My apartment was dim. Shadows clung to the corners despite the light peeking through the blinds. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, and that's when I noticed it. He was standing in the corner of the room. A man, or something wearing the shape of one. He wore a black suit, clean and pressed like he'd stepped out of a funeral. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his eyes were wrong. They weren't just dark, they were deep. Looking into them felt like standing on the edge of a cliff with no bottom. "I thought you'd never wake," he said, smiling. His voice was smooth, low, and far too calm. I jumped from the bed, backing into the nightstand. My phone slid to the floor. I didn't take my eyes off him. "Who are you?" I asked. My voice cracked like dry wood. He tilted his head, amused. "You know who I am, Inzaghi." My mouth went dry. "Felipe." "Felipil," he corrected softly, stepping closer. "But yes, that name will do." He moved with unnatural grace, as if the floor bent to his will. I reached for the crucifix on the shelf. He didn't flinch. "I'm not here to hurt you. If I wanted that, we wouldn't be speaking." "What do you want?" I asked. He smiled again, and this time I noticed the faint shimmer of sharp teeth behind his lips. Just a flicker. Just enough. "I want to talk. You said my name, Inzaghi. That makes us connected." "I didn't know what it was," I said. "It was written on that scroll. I didn't mean to say it aloud." He shrugged. "Intent doesn't matter. Spoken is spoken. A name is a key, and you turned it." My thoughts raced. I tried to remember what the ex-priest had said. Names carry weight. True names bind. But to what? "You're bound to me now." "No," Felipe said. "You're bound to the truth." He stepped toward the table and ran a hand across the surface. Dust scattered. I hadn't cleaned it in weeks. He didn't seem to mind. "There are things you've been searching for your entire life. Things about your mother. Your father. Why they died. Why the order kept you in the dark. I know these things. I froze. He chuckled softly. Of course I do. I've seen it all. I was there. That's not possible, I whispered. Oh, it is. I stared at him, unsure if I wanted to hear more. Part of me did. The broken, aching part that had never let go of their deaths. The part that still wondered why the church kept their files sealed, why every lead I followed ended in silence. But there's a price, I said. He nodded. There's always a price. What do you want? Felipe leaned against the wall, folding his arms. His eyes never left mine. Erase my name. That's all. Destroy the scroll. Remove every trace. Speak it one last time, and let it vanish into you. Once it's gone from the world, I'll tell you everything. I shook my head. That sounds too easy. It isn't, he said. You'll have to give up knowing you were ever part of something greater. But you'll gain the truth you've always craved. Or you can cling to your little protections, your crucifixes, your locked drawers, your priestly warnings. See how far they get you. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. I need time, I said. You have until the next full moon, Felipe said. After that, the choice makes itself. He turned to leave, but before he stepped into the shadow by the door, he looked back at me. Be careful, Inzaghi. Truth doesn't just set you free. It also burns. And then he was gone. Just like that. The air felt thick again. Real. The silence lifted, replaced by the distant hum of the street outside. I looked at the scroll on the desk. Still sealed. Still bleeding ink that moved when I wasn't looking. I should have been afraid. But deep down, below the fear, something darker stirred. Curiosity. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, Felipe, standing at the foot of my bed, silent and still, like he was waiting for me to speak first. His face never changed. Calm, unreadable, like a statue carved by something that never knew kindness. By morning, I felt hollow. Not tired, just emptied. I skipped work. I needed answers. Real ones. Not whispers, not tricks. The name fell appeal. It had appeared in one of the old church registries I found in the archives yesterday, tied to a forgotten chapel, Santa Maria del Silenzio, just outside the city center. The entry was brief, written in stiff Latin, but one thing stood out. Sealed beneath stone. His name must never echo again. That's where I went. The chapel stood behind a rusting gate and a field of dry grass. Forgotten. Its walls were blackened with time, the roof half collapsed. I stepped inside and was hit by the smell of old incense and mold. The stained glass had cracked, the wooden pews rotted and broken, but the altar still stood, simple, cold, and strangely untouched. I walked slowly, running my fingers over the cracked walls. That's when I saw it. Carved into the floor behind the altar, half covered by dust and debris, was a spiral symbol, identical to the wax seal from the scroll I found. I knelt and began brushing the dust away. There was a groove around the symbol, a faint line, almost like a hatch. I hesitated. My heart was thudding like I'd just run a mile. Something told me this was the edge of something I couldn't walk back from. But then I thought of my mother's face in that flickering vision. Her voice, broken and desperate. Hide the name. I pulled. The stone hatch groaned as it opened, revealing a set of narrow stairs descending into blackness. The air that rose from below was cold, damp, and heavy, like something had been waiting in the dark a very long time. I turned on my phone flashlight and stepped down. The stone steps spiraled tightly, the walls pressing in on both sides. The deeper I went, the colder it got. My breath started to fog. At the bottom, the passage opened into a chamber, wide and circular, with a domed ceiling covered in faded murals. Angels, demons, flames, chains. In the center of the room stood a stone pedestal, and behind it, a fresco that stopped me cold. It showed a man, tall, handsome, with a crown of black fire and Felipe's face. His hands were raised as if offering something, but the people around him weren't worshipping. They were weeping. And above the man's head, written in a script I almost didn't recognize, was a word I now knew too well. Felipil. Suddenly, the temperature dropped. I felt it before I heard it, a soft sound. Not a whisper exactly, more like a breath. Close to my ear. Inzaghi. I spun around. Nothing. Just stone and shadows. Then the lights of my phone flickered. The screen distorted, flickering like static, and for a second, I saw his face in the reflection. Not calm this time. Smiling. You're close now, he said. Do you see who I was? What they did to me? I backed away. The ground felt unstable. I didn't know if it was the fear or something deeper, like the stone itself resented me being here. I snapped a photo of the fresco, then fled. Up the stairs, into the chapel, into the daylight. I didn't stop running until I reached the tram. My hands were shaking. My lungs burned. But I had seen it. A place where he was remembered. Where he was painted, sealed, bound. They buried his name in stone. And now it was loose again. I didn't know what Felipe truly wanted. But I was starting to believe him when he said he hadn't lied. Not yet. And that scared me even more. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the cold cup of coffee in front of me. The steam had vanished long ago, just like my sense of peace. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed hesitant, like time itself was holding its breath. Felipe hadn't shown up in 2 days. That should have been a relief. But instead, the silence felt like a trick, like the pause before a storm. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of fire, of wings, of my mother's voice screaming my name down a hallway that had no end. I needed answers. The name, Felipe, kept echoing in my head. I could still see it, burned into that ancient scroll, as if it were alive. My mind kept drifting to what he said that night, in my apartment, that he knew things about my parents, that he had seen how they died. The way he'd spoken, so calm and certain, it had made my blood run cold. So I did something I told myself I wouldn't do. I called for him. Not aloud. I just whispered the name in my mind. Once. Twice. The room turned colder. The mirror across the kitchen flickered. Not shattered, not moved, flickered, like an old screen trying to pick up a signal. And then slowly his shape formed. Felipe stood there, inside the mirror, smiling faintly. His eyes met mine, and I saw something behind them, some strange mix of hunger and sorrow. "You called," he said, voice smooth like melted glass. I swallowed hard. "I want the truth. About my mother. About what happened." He tilted his head. "You're ready to see? No more games." Felipe raised his hand, palm outward, and the surface of the mirror rippled like water. "Then step closer." I did. Closer than I should have. Close enough to see the details in his face, the faint cracks along his jaw like old porcelain. And then everything around me dropped away. It felt like falling, but there was no wind, no ground, just pressure, like my thoughts were being pulled through a narrow tube. Then I was standing in a dimly lit room. Candles lined the walls. Old stone. Dust in the air. It smelled like burnt oil and old paper. A woman knelt in the center, crying softly. My heart stopped. It was her. My mother. Younger than I remembered. Her hands were shaking as she held a scrap of parchment, the same one I found. I was sure of it. She was whispering something in Latin, over and over, tears running down her cheeks. "No," a voice said behind her. "A man. My father. You can't, he'll find him. He'll find Inzaghi. He already knows," she said. "He's marked him. We have to bury it. Deep." There was movement in the shadows. Something huge and slow, breathing like a furnace. "You betrayed the pact," a third voice hissed. And then I saw him. Felipe, not in human form, but tall and twisted, with wings made of smoke and eyes like molten gold. But he wasn't attacking them. He was begging. "You promised me silence," he growled. "You promised me freedom." My mother stood. "You lied." He moved closer, and for a moment, I thought he would strike her down. But he didn't. He knelt. The demon knelt. "You don't understand what they'll do to me," he whispered. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for a second, I saw something terrifying in her face, pity. "I do," she said. "That's why I have to end this." She lifted the parchment and placed it in a brass container. My father lit the seal. Smoke rose, thick and black. And then the vision broke. I gasped, stumbling back from the mirror. My knees hit the floor. My whole body shook. Felipe's voice echoed softly from the glass. "Now you know one truth," he said. "But not the last." I looked up at him, heart pounding. "Why did she pity you?" His smile faded. "Because once," he said, "I wasn't like this." The mirror went still. I sat there, frozen, surrounded by silence again, but not peace. Never peace. Only lies. And one truth that now lived inside me, festering like a wound that would never heal. I stopped sleeping with the lights off. Not because I was scared of the dark, but because I couldn't stand what I saw when it was quiet. In the dark, the apartment shifted. Corners stretched. Shadows leaned. And every mirror I passed wasn't quite right. The first time it happened, I was brushing my teeth. Half asleep, robe half-tied, the usual. I leaned forward to spit, and when I looked up, my reflection didn't move. It just stared. Same face, same body, but still as glass. Then it smiled. I flinched so hard I knocked the cup into the sink. Water splashed across the counter, and I backed away. The reflection did too, but not at the same time, just a heartbeat late, like it had forgotten the timing of being me. After that, I covered all the mirrors, even the one in the hallway, taped old sheets over them, like I was hiding a crime scene. But Felipe didn't need glass anymore. He found other ways. That night, the walls began to talk. Not loud, not screaming, just whispers, little things. At first I thought it was the pipes, maybe an old neighbor's TV through the vents. But then the words formed. Inzaghi, the voice said, soft and close, as if someone was standing just behind my ear. I spun around. No one. Don't be afraid. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to finish what your mother started. That made me freeze. I hadn't spoken of her out loud. Not to anyone. I swallowed. My throat felt raw. What do you mean? Silence. I waited. And then the reflection in the black TV screen showed Felipe sitting in my chair, even though it was empty in reality. He looked tired, almost mournful. I made her the same offer, he said through the screen. Truth for release. A fair exchange. But she chose to keep me locked. She chose the world's safety over her son's peace. You don't have to make the same mistake. I unplugged the TV. The screen went dark. He was still there. I grabbed my coat and ran. I didn't even take shoes. The city was quiet. The cold cement on my bare feet grounded me, in a strange way. I walked aimlessly through side streets and alleys, until I ended up in front of the Biblioteca Ambrosiana, my workplace. Of course. Where else would I go? I had keys. I let myself in. Inside the archives, I dug for answers. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for anymore. Anything with the sigil, the name, the demon. I started pulling books off the shelves, one after another, until I found it, a black-covered volume I didn't remember filing. It was ancient. The spine had no title. I opened it. The first page was blank. But on the second, my name, written in red ink. Beneath it, the keeper speaks. I turned the pages. One by one, the entries changed. Not typed. Not inked. Written fresh, even as I read them. Descriptions of my day. Where I walked. What I felt. Even the reflection in the mirror. Every moment. Logged in a book that should have been dead for centuries. A chill ran down my spine. I heard a creak behind me and turned. In the reflection of the glass cabinet nearby, Felipe stood watching me. Not moving. Just watching. I didn't dare turn around again. I couldn't face both versions of him. His voice came from the air itself. You think you're chasing answers, he whispered. But you're being written too, Inzaghi. You're not the author here. Not anymore. I slammed the book shut. The reflection vanished. I sat down at the table, shaking. The question was no longer what does Felipe want? It was, who else is reading this story? And how long had they been turning my pages? Everything was unraveling. Even me. I don't remember walking home that night. I just remember the cold. The kind that doesn't touch your skin, but settles somewhere behind your bones. I had left Felipe in the mirror, his eyes following me even after I closed the door. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw my mother's hands, bloody, trembling, reaching for me through flames I couldn't feel. The next morning, I returned to the library. I shouldn't have. I should have taken the name, buried it in a river, or prayed, really prayed, for the first time in years. But instead, I took the old service elevator to the lowest sublevel, the one without working lights, the one where we kept records no one ever asked for. There was a rusted plaque on the wall, Archivio Morto. Dead archive. I passed rows of moldy wooden cabinets and cracked drawers. The smell was thick, paper rot, dust, and time. My flashlight flickered every few seconds. But I kept walking, deeper into the dark, until I found a door I'd never seen before. Iron bars. No knob. Just a circular indentation, the size of a palm, carved into the center. And on the wall beside it, painted in what I hoped was old varnish, was Felipe's sigil. 3 concentric circles, twisted like a broken wheel. I reached out. My fingers hovered over the center of the indentation. It was warm. The door clicked. Once. And then it creaked open, like it had been waiting. Inside was a single table, a chair, and a black, leather-bound journal sitting in the center. Beside it was a crucifix, broken, snapped at the middle like something had tried to bend Christ in half. I picked up the journal. Dust fell from the cover like ash. Property of Father Minaudi. The name hit me like a whisper from the past. I remembered it from the catacombs, etched into the wall beside that painting of Felipe. I turned the pages. They were filled with neat handwriting, each letter precise like someone who feared being misunderstood. April 3rd, 1741. He came to me again. Not in flesh, but in fire. Said his name was Felipe. Said he remembered the wind before the fall. I do not believe demons weep, but he did. Or pretended to. April 12th. The boy nearly spoke it. We had to remove him from the monastery. If a child learns a true name, he becomes a mirror, and mirrors crack under weight. April 30th. There is no exorcism strong enough to unwrite a name. Only silence. Only forgetting. But memory is stubborn. Then one line. Underlined. Scribbled with trembling hands. He will make you choose what you love over what is right. My hands were shaking. I turned another page. Tucked inside was a folded letter. To the one who finds this. If you are reading these words, then the name has surfaced. It always does. You may think you are strong enough to bargain. You are not. He will offer truth, beauty, even peace. He will wear your grief like a cloak. Do not try to defeat him. Do not try to understand him. Bury the name again. In blood. In silence. In stone. I looked up from the letter. The room had grown colder. The flashlight flickered violently, then died. And in the reflection of the cracked glass covering the crucifix, I saw him. Felipe. Standing just behind me. He wasn't smiling anymore. You're digging too deep, Inzaghi, he said softly. Careful, some truths bury the living with the dead. I turned around, but the room was empty. Only the journal remained in my hand, now wet with sweat, or maybe something worse. I had gone looking for a secret. I had found a warning. And something inside me knew, the real cost hadn't even begun. I don't know what day it is anymore. The clocks in my apartment stopped last night at exactly 3:03 a.m. Not just one, the wall clock, my phone, even the digital alarm. All frozen. I've replaced batteries. I've reset them. But they always flick back to 3:03, the hour he first whispered in my ear. Felipe. He's no longer waiting for me to sleep. Now, he just comes when he pleases. This morning, I was brushing my teeth when I saw him in the mirror. Not behind me, in the reflection. The tiles in the mirror were cracked, water running upward, and his face slowly emerged through the fog on the glass, like a photograph developing in real time. Inzaghi, he said softly, as if we were old friends meeting after a long time apart. Let me show you just one more piece. I didn't answer. I spat in the sink and kept brushing. I've learned that silence hurts him more than screaming. But that didn't stop him. He pressed his hand against the mirror. The skin peeled like parchment, revealing black veins underneath. His eyes locked onto mine. That's when the world around me shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I stood in a street I didn't recognize. Everything was golden. Sunlight warmed my skin. There were no shadows here. I turned and saw them, my parents. Both alive. Laughing. Holding my hands. I was 6. My father picked me up and spun me around. My mother kissed my forehead. I remembered the feeling. Her perfume. The way her fingers always tucked my collar straight. Felipe stood just out of reach, watching me. This is the world where you never learned my name, he said quietly. One where your mother chose to run instead of protect the seal. One where your father never stepped into the church that night. He stepped closer. His eyes were calm, but there was a tremble in his voice. I can give you this. Not a dream. A full rewrite. A life where you never look over your shoulder. Where your hands don't shake. Where you sleep through the night. My throat was dry. I couldn't breathe properly. He held out a piece of parchment, the same vellum with his name on it. Erase it, he said. Burn it. Tear it. Speak it backward. Any way you choose. Just remove it, and this world becomes yours. I looked at the paper. The ink was smudged, bleeding like fresh wounds. But the name was still visible, curved letters like they'd been written in bone and ash. Felipe. I turned away. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run into the arms of those two people who looked like my parents and believe it was all real. But deep down, I knew it was just a mask. A painting on broken glass. This isn't truth, I whispered. Felipe's smile faded. No, he said. But it could be. The illusion broke. I snapped back to my apartment, kneeling on the floor, sweating. My ears rang with silence. Too silent. The books on my shelf were different. The spines had changed. Where there were titles like Ritual Binding in the 16th century and Saints and Sinners, Forgotten Orders, now there were books I'd never seen before. One said simply History of the Unnamed. Another, futures that never were. I pulled one down. The pages were blank, except for a single sentence on the first page. He who knows the name may choose to forget it, but the name never forgets him. I threw it across the room. Then came the whispers. They came from the cracks in the walls, from under the floorboards, from the very letters inside the books. They all said the same thing: erase the name. Erase the name. Erase the name. I covered my ears. But something inside me, something weaker, more human, began to wonder. What if he wasn't lying? What if I could live without fear, without questions, without pain? I shook the thought away. No. The truth has teeth, and it bites hard, but it's better than being fed lies with honey. Still, I knew one thing for sure now. The name was weakening. It cracked a little every time I denied him. Every time I chose to endure. And if it cracked enough, maybe, just maybe, I could break him. But if I wasn't careful, he might break me first. The air in the library had turned sour. The deeper I went beneath the marble floors, the more I could feel something pulsing beneath my feet, like a second heartbeat that didn't belong to me. I carried the journal of Father Menotti tightly in one hand and a bundle of supplies in the other. A candle made from church wax, a rusted dagger I found in the archives, and the scroll containing Felipe's true name. The pages of the journal had shown me the ritual, a way to bind Felipe, not just to the name, but to silence. Eternal, suffocating silence. But it came with a cost. Menotti had written in shaky Latin, "To seal the voice of the fallen, one must give blood willingly." The name must be written in life itself, and the writer must forget everything they ever learned from the voice. I paused at the rusted gate that led into the crypt, the hidden chamber buried beneath the library. No one had been here in centuries. The air tasted like dust and mold, thick and cold. I pushed open the gate, and the hinges screamed like something dying. Inside, the floor was covered in old stones marked with faded symbols. A circle had already been drawn there, burned into the stone by someone long ago. I knelt in the center and set the candle down. Its flame flickered weakly, like it was afraid to shine too brightly. I unrolled the scroll, the ink on Felipe's name still pulsing. Yes, actually pulsing, like a vein. Then I heard it. His voice. "Inzaghi," Felipe whispered, soft and broken, like wind through a hollow. "You don't have to do this." I looked up. His form stood just outside the circle. He wasn't trying to enter. He knew he couldn't. His suit was torn, black smoke curling off the edges. His eyes, they didn't glow this time. They looked tired. Human. "You promised me one night of truth," he said. "And I gave it to you. Don't turn your back now." I held up the dagger. "You showed me pieces. Just enough to make me doubt. That's your game. That's always been your game." He stepped closer, shadows dragging like a cape behind him. "No games, Inzaghi. Just grief. Just pain. Your parents gave everything to stop me, yes. But they also gave everything to protect you. Don't throw that away." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from shaking. I pressed the tip of the dagger to my palm. "You said you wanted to be forgotten," I said. He nodded. "Yes, but not by you." I drove the dagger into my hand. The pain was instant and sharp, but it grounded me. Blood dripped into the center of the circle. The candle's flame flared, turning blue. I dipped a feather into my blood and began writing his name across the stone in a wide arc, letter by letter, slowly, carefully. Felipe. He howled. Not with rage. With sorrow. With something that almost sounded like betrayal. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, voice cracking like ice. "You're not binding a demon. You're burying a part of yourself." I kept writing. The air vibrated. The circle glowed. The moment the last letter was sealed in blood, the candle went out. Darkness swallowed the room. And then silence. Not just the absence of noise. A pressure, like the world was holding its breath and waiting for something that would never come. Felipe was gone. But as I sat there, bleeding and shaking, a strange emptiness crept into my mind. I couldn't remember what his face looked like anymore. I tried to picture him, but he was fading, like smoke slipping through my fingers. I stared at the scroll. I didn't know why I was holding it. I didn't even remember what I came down here to do. But something inside me whispered that I had finished something important. Something dangerous. And yet, as I stood up and wrapped my wounded hand, I felt a strange weight in my chest. Not sadness. Not fear. But the feeling you get when someone is watching you, from just beyond the light. I walked out of the crypt with blood on my palm and silence in my ears. But deep inside me, far below where memory ends, I could feel it. The name was still there. Waiting. I stepped into the abandoned church, just after midnight. The heavy wooden doors creaked shut behind me without my touch. The air was thick, too thick, like the oxygen was being pulled out of the room. Dust floated like ash in the beams of moonlight breaking through shattered stained glass. The altar stood crooked at the far end, draped in what looked like rotted silk. The statues of saints that once stood proudly were now headless, arms broken, as if they'd tried to flee and failed. I walked slowly, each step echoing like a drumbeat in a tomb. Then I saw him, Felipe. He was sitting on the edge of the altar, legs crossed, hands resting in his lap like a teacher waiting for a slow student. He wore a black suit, neat and spotless, though his presence made the shadows crawl. His eyes were fire buried under glass, glowing softly. "You came," he said, smiling like he already knew everything I was about to say. "I didn't come for you," I said. "I came for the truth." He stood, clapping his hands once. The sound cracked like thunder. "And truth you shall have, Inzaghi. Sit." There was a single wooden chair in the middle of the aisle, one I hadn't seen before. I hesitated, then sat. He stepped in front of me, lowering himself slowly until we were eye to eye. "You think you know who your parents were, but you've only seen what I allowed you to see. I fed you breadcrumbs, and you followed them like a starving man." I clenched my fists. "Then stop playing games and show me." Felipe tilted his head. "A deal then. I give you everything, the unfiltered truth, even if it destroys you. And in return," he leaned closer, voice like a breeze through dry leaves, "you give me silence. Erase my name. Forever." I looked at him. His face, his eyes, his stillness. This thing, this demon, didn't lie like others. It twisted. It leaned. But it never outright lied. "Show me first," I said, voice shaking. The church fell into darkness. Then the walls peeled back. I was no longer sitting. I was standing in a stone chamber lit by torchlight. A woman stood over a table, chanting in Latin. My mother, younger than I remembered, her long black hair tied back, her hands steady. On the table, a child me. Behind her, a man. My father, holding a dagger, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Maria," he whispered, "but I cannot let you trap him." He lunged forward. Blood. Screams. The torchlight flickered. Then the vision shifted. My mother was dying, but smiling. "Hide it from him," she whispered to the dark. "Hide it until the right moment." And the shadows answered, "It is done." The world snapped back into the church. I was breathing fast, heart racing. "You said they died protecting me," I gasped. "I said they died for you," Felipe said. "Your mother tried to bind me again. Your father, he tried to stop her, thinking he was saving you from the curse. He failed both of you. And you?" I whispered. He didn't answer. Just watched me. There was something in his eyes now. Not pride. Not triumph. Something close to sadness. "I was not always like this," he said. "I was a guardian once. Bound by duty. But over time, men rewrote me, feared me, twisted my name until all that was left was a demon." I stood slowly. "So what are you now?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That depends on what you do next." I looked at my hand. In it, the final seal. The last ritual, burning his name, removing it from every record, every whisper, every trace. One spark, and Felipe would be forgotten. Powerless. But with it, the last thread of truth would vanish too. I would forget what I saw. Who my parents really were. Why they died. All of it. I looked up. Felipe waited. No tricks. No push. Just a choice. The church grew silent. And I knew, whatever I decided next would change everything. The wind inside the ruined chapel wasn't real. It blew from nowhere and carried no scent, no warmth, no chill. Just a weight, like it was pushing through time itself. Candles lit themselves as I stepped forward, one by one, casting long shadows across the stone floor that twisted and stretched unnaturally. The altar ahead was cracked, and behind it stood Felipe. He looked human. Calm. Polished shoes, black suit, tie tucked neatly beneath a long coat. But his eyes gave it away. They weren't just dark, they were hollow, like two mirrors that only reflected fear. I clutched the parchment in my left hand. His true name, written in my own blood. The final part of the ritual. "You came alone," he said, voice smooth and low. "I expected more drama. Perhaps a priest or a circle of salt. But you, Inzaghi, you always did love silence." "I came to end this," I replied. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You don't sound certain." I wasn't. Not really. The more I learned about him, the more the lines blurred. Felipe wasn't just evil, he was trapped. tortured by centuries of silence and solitude. But then again, maybe that's what he wanted me to believe. That's what made him dangerous. I know the binding now, I said, raising the parchment. I speak this, I seal you. Forever. Yes, he nodded, stepping closer, slow and careful like I was a frightened animal. But you forget what you lose. He raised his hand, and the air shifted. Around us, the chapel changed. The stone walls melted into a warm kitchen. The scent of basil and garlic floated up. A woman, my mother, stood at the counter, humming softly as she stirred a pot. I saw myself, 10 years old, sitting at the table smiling. My father ruffled my hair and poured wine into 2 glasses. No, I whispered. This isn't real. But it could be, Felipe said gently. This is the life you would have had if they hadn't crossed me. I can give you this. One word, Inzaghi. Erase the name, and I can make it real. I stared at the scene, and my throat tightened. My hands shook. My mother turned and smiled, eyes full of warmth. She called my name. Inzaghi, we're waiting for you. I lowered the parchment. Just a little. I never wanted power, I whispered. Just answers. And I've given them, Felipe said. I told you what your mother did. I showed you your father's death. I've kept my word. But at what cost? He didn't answer. The scene flickered. My mother's smile stretched too wide. My father's eyes went blank. The warm light dimmed. The kitchen began to twist, melting like wax. The illusion was falling apart. I stepped back, heart pounding. The parchment pulsed in my hand. You never meant to give me peace, I said, voice breaking. Only torment dressed as truth. Felipe's calm faded. His face twisted ever so slightly, not into rage but regret. And that was worse. He looked at me like a father looks at a son who's about to make a mistake. You won't get another chance, he warned. Once the name is sealed again, it will take more than blood to find me. I nodded slowly. I know. I stepped toward the altar. I took the ceremonial knife and pressed the blade into my palm, deep enough to draw blood, not enough to kill. I let it drip onto the parchment, each drop landing on the syllables of his name, Felipil. He flinched. I raised my voice, not in anger but with finality. The Latin incantation spilled from my mouth, words passed down through centuries meant to silence his kind. As I spoke, the candles dimmed. The wind stopped. Felipe backed away, face blank now. You could have had your parents back, he said softly one last time. I'd rather live with pain than build a lie, I said. The parchment burst into flames without fire. It turned black, then dissolved into ash in my hand. A sound like distant thunder shook the chapel. Cracks spread through the floor. Felipe screamed, but not like a man. His voice cracked the air, shrill and deep at once, echoing inside my skull. Then he collapsed, not to the ground, but into himself. His form pulled inward, shrinking, screaming, folding like paper in flame until all that was left was silence. Total, ringing silence. I fell to my knees. The stone was cold. My breath was heavy. I touched my chest. My heartbeat had changed. One beat, then a second. 2 rhythms. One mine. One not. I didn't speak his name. But I didn't destroy it either. I carried it now. Inside me. And somewhere deep within my soul, he smiled. They say silence is peace. But ever since that night, I've learned it can be something else entirely. It's been 3 weeks since the ritual. The church where it happened, St. Lucia's, no longer exists. Not in maps, not in memory. When I tried to go back, I found a clothing shop built over its ruins. The stone was gone. The gate sealed. The shadows silent. I remember everything. That's the curse. When I bound Felipe again, I didn't destroy his name. I rewrote it, deep inside me. I spoke it backward in the language hidden between breaths. The pages of the scroll curled into ash, and the ink melted into my skin. Not visibly. No one sees it. But I feel it. Like a cold line burned down my spine. The world moved on. Or pretended to. My apartment is quieter now. Too quiet. I stopped hearing whispers in mirrors. My reflection looks like me again, mostly. But sometimes, when I pass a window at night, I see my lips moving even though I'm not speaking. I don't stick around long enough to read what they're saying. I went back to the library. Back to work. Back to pretending. My colleagues said I looked different, more rested. I smiled and said I had taken some time off. But rest isn't real anymore. Not for me. Each night, when I lie down, I feel something else lying with me. Inside me. A second presence. Not speaking. Just watching. Waiting. Felipe kept his part of the deal. He showed me the full truth before I sealed him. I saw my mother, her hands shaking as she stitched the scroll, her eyes red from crying. I saw my father, a man I barely remembered, standing outside the church, holding a knife, arguing with Felipe. He was offered a deal too. And like me, he didn't take it. He died sealing the door. My mother died sealing the words. And I live carrying them. I wonder sometimes if I made the wrong choice. If I had let Felipe go, just for one truth, maybe I could have freed myself. But freedom and peace are not the same. I've started keeping journals again, writing every night, trying to map the voice I sometimes hear in dreams. It's faint, like it's coming from beneath the earth. Not words. Not yet. Just a rhythm. Like breathing. Or waiting. I've also noticed something strange in the books I handle. Some words vanish when I touch them. Not burn, not fade, just disappear. Mostly names. Sometimes whole lines. One day, I found a blank page inside a book that used to describe Felipe. That's how I know he's still here. Not in this world. But in me. Bound to a name that no longer exists outside my bones. And now, sometimes when I write my own name, Inzaghi Moretti, I hesitate. Like I'm not sure it's still mine. There's a quiet comfort in that, I guess. Because even though Felipe is gone, he left me with something. A truth most people never get to see. The world is not ruled by what we understand. It's ruled by what we fear to name. And I know one name the world will never speak again. Because I carry it. And I'm not sure who I'll be when it tries to speak back. The silence is still here. But now I know better. It's not peace. It's waiting.